Hello, everyone. Today with me is Vatsal, and we are doing one of the few free sessions I do every year in which I'm guiding an undergraduate or a recent graduate into the first years of the career. So how to look for a job, for a good job, and how to navigate the first few months at the new job so that you can get a kind of job that you like and that gives you the growth that you're looking for. Today with me is Vatsal. Hello, Vatsal. Good morning. If you can
Good
just tell us
morning.
a couple of words about what you studied, what kind of career you would be looking for.
Sure. So I recently did my master's in computer science from New Jersey, and I am actually working on a startup in New York City right now as a full stack engineer. I'm looking more opportunities towards full stack engineering and software engineering in general. And I also used to intern with some of the big tech companies, and yeah, that's about me.
Fantastic. Thank you. So I will first open to like any kind of question you might have. Could be about the first few years of your career, or for example, you mentioned that you're working at a startup. So it could be questions that you have about how you can make the most out of it, how you can grow within it, or it could be questions about what are the options you might explore.
Yeah, so what should be the case to break into this technology world and get the most out of it as a fresh new grad, I would say. How can I make most out of it?
Yeah, I think that one of the first few things uh, you might do is this concept that your first job will absolutely not look like the rest of your career, or at least not necessarily. And a mistake that I see a lot of young people do, in particular bright ones, is to try to work like right now they got hired in their first job and they have a little box which is the tasks of their current role, and they're trying to go very deep but only within the box. And this is great if you are 100% sure that whatever is in that box is what you want to do for the rest of your career. But for most people, that first box is not necessarily what they chose. It's simply the first, let's say, box that they happen to be in. And so what really pays in the first few years is to try to, yes, of course you need to work within that box to do a good job because that's what you're paid to do. But the idea would be to try to do the kind of like the minimum necessary to do a good job within that box, and then spend
Hmm.
the extra energy and extra time that you have to look outside of the box. And when I say looking outside of the box, I do not mean necessarily to look outside of your company, but I
Hmm.
mean within your company, outside of the role you're given. So, for example, trying to understand what are the jobs of your colleagues,
Hmm.
trying to understand what is the perspective of your manager. Your manager, of course, for example, pays attention to some of the things that are part of your job, but they also pay attention to things that are outside of your job. Things it could be things such as cost, revenue, hiring, sales, customer satisfaction, all these kind of things, and you want to try to get what's the perspective. You want to understand why they take the decisions that they take. And the reason you want to
Hmm.
do that is because it will give you a lot of perspective about what options are available to you. So that's great because maybe you might have a realization that what maybe you entered as a developer, but what you really want to do, for example, could be project management, could be sales, could be a more managerial role, anything. But getting a bit of that perspective can tell you what are your options. And then the second thing, which is perhaps more important, is that for most of your life, especially the part of life that you spent at school, the way that you get promoted to the next job or to the next stage of your life is by doing well at the stage of life you're currently in. So for example, you got promoted to college by doing high school well. And you got promoted out of college by doing college well, and so on. The problem is that that stops being true in working life. In working life, doing well at your job is just the requirement to keep your job, but it will not necessarily make you advance to the next job. I mean, for example, to the next stage of your career, for example, a promotion. What instead brings you to the next stage of your career is showing that you will be able to handle the next job that's in front of you. So let's say, for example, that you entered as a technical role and you want to be promoted in a more managerial role. You will not get the promotion to managerial role by showing that you can do technical job better than anyone else. You will be promoted to a managerial role when you show that you will be able to do a good job at being a manager. So for example, when you show that you will be able to coordinate people, to have a basic understanding of costs, revenue, and so on, when you are able to give good feedback, when you are able to work maybe with other departments, to train people, and so on.
Yeah.
Do you have any questions regarding to these?
I think this is pretty clear. You were really straightforward in your answer, I would say. I have one more question. Like, how do you recommend setting goals for like early careers, like what kind of strategies do you think a person should have,
Yeah, so I think that regarding to this, there are kind of like two kind of people, and depending on what kind of people you are, there is a different advice which is best. There is one group of people which has a very clear idea of what they want to do. I don't know, I want to become this role, or I want eventually in 10 years to start my own company, or anything like this. Like you already have a clear picture of where you want to be in 10 or 15 years. If that's your case, I advise that you talk about it. It's completely fair game in most companies to mention the goal to your boss or to your boss's boss, especially if it's something that you can do within the company, because company love when they have someone ambitious. If instead it's a goal outside of the company, for example, you want to start your own career, your own company, maybe you don't necessarily want to talk about it within your company, but I advise you that you talk about it with someone at least. Maybe someone who already is where you want to be in 15 years. That would probably be the best thing you can do. It's very easy to find such people, for example, on Twitter, which is where we found each other, because people on Twitter tend to be quite open. It doesn't mean that everyone you ask, of course, will be open, but it does mean that if you ask to, let's say, 10 people, and you make an ask which is not just a copy paste, but it's a well-structured ask where you are, hi, I'm writing you because I think that in your position as, I don't know, someone who started a company 15 years ago, you are where I want to be in life in 15 years, and I want just to ask a couple of questions. Here are the questions, question number one, question number two. If you ask something which is very clear, very concise, to the point, personalized, and that is time boxed, meaning that they know that it will take them 3 to 5 minutes to answer. You won't ask for 2 hours of their time, and you ask 10 people, the chances that 1, 2, or 3 will answer is very high. So this is what I will do. To ask
Okay.
someone where is 10 to 15 years forward where you want to be, and you ask them
Mhm.
what they did, what challenges, what steps they recommend next.
So what I sense right now is you're saying something about a mentorship and a mentee relationship. So I just want to follow up on that and ask you like, what's the best way to find a mentor? How would you know that, okay, if this person wants to mentor me and if this relationship works with each other and like, would you like shed some light on that?
Yeah, thank you. I think so. This is my very personal opinion, and I think that mentorship outside of the company is a bit overrated as an idea, in the sense that if you manage to find a mentor, fantastic. That would be super useful. However, it is very hard to find a mentor if you start the discussion as I would like you to be my mentor. And the
Okay.
reason is because if you put yourself in the shoes of the person who's 15 years ahead of you, has a great career, maybe a great overall life, they are probably very busy. They don't know you. And if you come to them directly asking for a mentorship relationship, which is something which probably means I will take 1 hour of your time at least once a month for the next few years, that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of scary. Like it
Yeah.
feels like a lot of investment.
Mm-hmm.
And
True.
so unless you already know that person, maybe because you met them at they've been, I don't know, a teacher of yours at university, or maybe somehow they work in your company, or for any reason you already met them. Otherwise, it's going to be really hard to find a good mentor asking for a
Mm-hmm.
mentorship first. And the
Okay.
people who accept with you asking for a mentorship first, unless you are someone outstanding, which has a super great curriculum already, probably they are not going to be great mentors. So what I
Mm-hmm.
would do instead is that at first I would just ask for very time box commitment. Something like I have this question, and you know it's going to take 5 to 10 minutes. Or can you introduce me to this? Or I have this dream. Who would be the best person to talk about it? Like these are great questions that
Mm-hmm.
since they take 5 to 10 minutes to answer, you can get almost anyone to answer them.
Okay. Yeah.
And then hopefully you follow up on that. So if they give you some piece of advice, you put it into practice, and then you demonstrate with that that you are someone who is not going to waste their time, both in the sense that you require 5 minutes of them, not 1 hour. And number
Mm-hmm.
two, with the advice that they give you will not go to waste because you will actually implement it. You do it once, you do it twice, and then you build trust. And at this point, they will be much more open to have a more stable and regular relationship with you.
Okay. So now, as you know, that this is not a really good market for people in tech and in general, especially new grads. So let's say that what kind of strategies do you think could help anyone find a job, be it like online presence or any networking in the industry, and how would someone get into those fields?
So I think that one thing that helps is so if you have something very um, relatively specific in mind, I think that
Mm-hmm.
it pays to just ask someone who's doing the job. Um, so what I mean by this is that maybe I am not necessarily the best person to know exactly, since I live in Italy and since I'm not a software developer, for example, to know exactly what it would take to get a great software development job in the US. But
Mm-hmm.
if you ask me about what I'm currently doing, which is consulting, I would be the perfect person to answer that. So what I would do would be, for example, to ask anyone who's working in the role that you want or to be, or has worked that role and is relatively matching the level of ambition that you have. And you kind of ask them what you can either ask them the direct question of what's the best, how would I get a job at your company besides the official channel, which is, I'm sure that there is a career page on the website and that I can apply there, but what else can I do which would really help? And the question could be something like, demonstrate that you've worked in the past on a project like this. And for example, they will say like, you need to demonstrate that in the past you have developed this kind of application with this kind of language. Perfect. Then you can start doing it. And you can either do it like, if possible, try to find a way to do it within your current job. If not, nowadays, thanks to, there are a lot of resources online, and especially now with software development, it's really easier than it has ever been with Cursor or Claude to try to start doing a project of this kind on your own. And then even if it's not something big, then you have something that you can show that you already know more than 90% of the other candidates how to do the job that they might be hiring you for. And that will probably be extremely valuable. Online presence, I think that only makes sense if you want to work as an independent. For example, someone like me, and you need to have a stream of clients. And in this case, online presence will be indispensable. But if instead you aim to, or if you want to start your company because it will help with hiring. But if instead your objective is a job within another company, I don't really think that online presence is very valuable. What's more valuable is to demonstrate that you've worked on at least one relevant project to the job that you're applying.
Okay.
If you have this, then the way that you can leverage social media is, for example, on Twitter, but on LinkedIn, to message someone who's working in one of your target companies and tell them, hi, I've recently worked on a project that does this and that. I know that it's relevant to this job in your company. What would be the next step? Something along those lines.
Also, okay, so now that we're talking about that, let's say I got an interview or any of the person got an interview. What do you think can a person do to make a strong impression on the interviewer and like be the strongest candidate there? Any tips for that?
Yes. So I think the number one thing, if you haven't done many interviews yet, is to do a few interviews. Maybe it could be with interviews with companies that you do not really care about. Or if you have some friends who already have hired someone, you can ask them to do a mock interview for you, something like this. But if you don't have enough practice with interviews, get some practice under your belt with jobs that do not really interest you, because I know very few people that can do a good impression on their first or second job interview, because it's new and it's simply a bit intimidating. Maybe you the first or second time you will think a lot instead of having the answers just flowing. So I just suggest, if you don't have practice, to get a little bit of practice, not necessarily to match 1, 2, or 3 interviews, so that you will be much more confident and fluent during the interviews that matter. So this is one thing. The second thing is to understand, to have a clear idea of what the mistakes are.
Okay.
I think that if you are, like, there are a few companies, like if you're really aiming for like top of the top of the top companies, the ones that are known to only hire from Harvard and whatnot, like this, then you really need to make a strong impression. But for many other companies, the number one priority, in my opinion, is not to raise major red flags. And I'm telling you what are some of the red flags that you might raise so that you can think about how, so that you can be conscious not to raise them.
Mm-hmm.
One is the idea that once you get the job, you will not be present. By not be present, I mean you will quit in 1 month, in 1 year,
Okay.
or you have no ambition and you only care about doing the very bare minimum to get the salary, and that's it. And people will have to nudge you with a carrot or a stick, otherwise you will not do anything else. This is one thing. The second thing is that you will be a pain in the ass to work with. And
Mm-hmm.
by that I mean that you will require a lot of direction, um, or that you are not able to communicate things concisely, or that you might create a lot of trouble with other colleagues, or things like this. And so you mitigate these by going to the point with your questions, which doesn't mean necessarily that you need to answer everything in 1 or 2 lines, but the idea is that you are able to know what's the point of your answer, and you go there to it, and then you expand afterwards if there's need to be. And another thing is that, for example, you are not an excessively difficult person during the interview, that you are relatively accommodating,
Mm-hmm.
and so on. Another thing which is relatively important is to have some level of attention to detail.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea that they don't get any idea that you might create a big mistakes or big problems, or that you are someone that needs to be micromanaged all the time.
Okay.
So some of those things. Another thing which really helps is if you show that you kind of know how working in a company works,
Okay.
which means,
Especially with the company that I'm interviewing with.
yes, so if you manage to do that, it's great. Not in a, it's, I don't think it's a deal breaker, meaning that a lot of companies know that there are a lot of professionals which might have been very talented working at another company which has maybe slightly different rules. And that's okay if you don't know yet the rules of the company, but you need to show that you will be flexible enough to learn them once you are there. Uh, that's 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 the idea. Um, I make an example. Um, for example, like when I got my first job in DuPont, the American
Mm-hmm.
company, but I was working in Germany, and during the job interview, I knew like very well what were the businesses in which DuPont was working, like some information about the company, but I knew next to nothing about their culture. And
Okay.
first thing I've noticed, like not noticed, but first thing that they told me, I remember I enter the company, the recruiter meets me downstairs at the reception, shake hands, then we climb the stairs to go to the office where the interview would be. I'm not holding the handrail as I climb the stairs, and the interviewer tells me to hold the handrail because in DuPont we care about safety. So
Mm-hmm.
the fact that I didn't know about this rule before doesn't really matter. I'm not really required that. What matters is that I take it seriously from now on. So the
Yeah.
fact for example, the interviewer won't be looking if the first time I already know that the rule about holding the handrail, but they will be
Mm-hmm.
looking if the second time we take the stairs, whether I will be holding the handrail. That's that's
Okay.
that's kind of the logic. So you are not really
Mm-hmm.
required to know the things before the interview. So of course, if you do it, can make a good impression, but you are
Mm-hmm.
required to show that you are an adaptable person, which will learn relatively fast on the job once you're.
Okay. So next question would be, so as this is like not a good rewarding market for lots of tech industries or any other industries, but in general. So let's say that I have applied, I have interviewed with a company, I don't hear back. So what should I do if I don't hear back? Also, like how should I handle rejection, or any other candidate should handle rejection? Stay motivated during this long job search. Any advice on that?
Yeah. So usually you want to. It's completely normal that that a recruiter takes couple of 2 to 3 weeks. It's completely normal for a few weeks because maybe they're interviewing three candidates, let's say, and not all are available for interview this week. And then after the interview, they need to schedule an internal meeting to think, to talk about it, something like that. So a couple of weeks, 2, 3 weeks is completely normal. I would not follow up before that because following up too eagerly, unless they told you that we will let you know in 1 week, that would show that
Mhm.
you might become then a pain in the ass to work for, in a way.
Okay.
On the other hand, after a few weeks, 3, 4 weeks, completely fair to follow up uh, politely and in a way that shows that you understand that they might be busy. So not something like, hey, I haven't heard anything, but I would rather say something like, it's a very good practice when you ask for things to put the burden on yourself. Something along the lines of, hello, we had that interview 3 weeks ago. So you're reminding them of what happened so that they don't have to close the email and look through in their inbox to figure out who you are. And then the next thing I will say, like, since I haven't heard from you, I was just wondering whether you require more information from my side. Thank you. Have a great day. Something along those lines. So
Okay,
short,
perfect.
some information, some very short information, one line, just to remind them of who you are and what's the context. And then you can put the burden on you. So, for example, do you require any more information from my side? Then
Okay.
something which is important is that if you don't get the job, it's not necessarily the end of the company. So I make the example of myself. I did the first interview with DuPont. They called me to their headquarters for a group interview. They flew us in. We spent 2 days there. We were 7 people, and then I think they let me know. They let me know after 2 or 3 weeks, and they told me that they chose someone else for the job I applied. And then two
Mhm.
months later, they called me and they had another job opening. And they asked me if I was interested. And I said, of course, yes. And then that's how I got my first real job. So those things happen. Um, I'm saying that one on your side to not feel very demoralized. There are some rejections which of course are about you, but plenty of
Mhm.
rejections are completely not about you. It just so happened that maybe they found another candidate which was exceptional, better than you, um,
Mhm.
something along those lines. Completely fair
Okay.
game to ask the reviewer. Um, if there are other relevant job opportunities in their company other than the one you applied for, or especially if you're working for a large company, if they know about other departments that they might have openings for people with your profile.
Okay. So final question would be, do you have any final piece of guidance? Would you like to give someone who's looking for a new job, who's actually switching a role, or anyone who's available in the market?
Yeah, I think that one advice is the worst outcome you might have in the very early part of your career is not that you have trouble getting a job, but it's that you get a bad job. If
Mm,
you get a bad job and you stay stuck in a bad job for the first few years of your career, that will have
mhm,
complete, that will have like a snowballing effect on the rest of your life. On the rest of your career, of course, because you will not learn much, you will not advance much, but also in your personal life, because if you have a bad boss, maybe the days at job are frustrating, maybe because it's a bad boss, he's not good at prioritizing, and you have to work very long hours and for not much, and so on. So worst thing that can happen is that you work for a bad company or a bad boss, and you waste a lot of time. So
mm,
my advice would be to one, look not just to get a job, but to get a good job. And by good job, I don't mean a good salary necessarily, but a job in which you learn, a job in which you will have a good boss, and a job eventually, if that's your ambition, that provides the stepping stone towards what your ambition is.
okay.
Of course, I'm not saying salary is not important. Then, depending on everyone's situation, you might
Mhm,
have some requirements on the salary. But what I'm saying is, I've seen so many people who only look at salary and only looking to get a job, and it's a bad job, and that they hate the job or they get stuck, and that's terrible. So my advice
okay.
is to look for a good boss. How do you look for a good boss? One way, one possibility is simply you look for companies that you like. Like there are some companies that it is relatively well known that they have a good culture, where the likelihood that you have a good boss is relatively high. Or you look on Twitter for people that you would like to work for. And it's
Mhm,
completely fair, for example, to message one of those people and ask them for advice like, I have this ambition, I have these skills. What companies do you have some pointers about jobs that would be great for example?
okay. Mhm,
The other way in which you can get information about a good boss is during the job interview. Usually, the interviewer towards the end of the interview will ask you if you have any questions. Some great questions to ask are, what does career progression look like in this company?
okay.
And make sure that they answer with a speed. So for example, not only they say, well, after this job, you progress to this job, and then you progress to that job, but you want to know what's the time. Do people progress every 2 years, every year, every 5 years, on average, of course, but you want to get an idea of that. Another good question is, why do people usually stop working here? Like, why do they quit or why do they get fired?
Okay. Yep.
That's uh, that's um, that's a question that can give a lot of insight. Another question that might work uh, is, imagine like you can ask them, if I get hired, what are the most likely point or what are the most likely points of friction or obstacles that new hires in this company face? This could be another good question to get an idea of what it's like to work there. And it's also a fair question to ask. Well, hopefully you get to be interviewed by your future boss, if it's
Hmm.
possible, and that's the best outcome, so that you get an idea of what kind of person they are, and otherwise, it's it's a fair option to get some information about who's this person, or what kind of person they are. Um, yeah,
Okay, yeah, those are really good points. I made so many notes in this session. Thanks.
fantastic.
Yeah.
And then one last point of advice I would have is make sure that you negotiate your salary or your career progression.
Okay.
This is something that I didn't do, and I have a lot of regret on that. And a lot of people don't do. And instead, I have now come to believe that everyone should always negotiate their salary or career progression. Why? Because the worst possible outcome is just that they say, no, this is going to be your salary if you accept. Almost no company will retract the offer because you asked for a higher salary. And if they
Hmm.
do, they were not a company that you would want to work for anyway. Of course, like
Okay.
if you ask something which is completely outlandish, of course, that's not good. But some level of negotiation, asking for some percentage more is completely fair game. And in my opinion, it is also a good sign. It's a sign that you understand how it works. It's a sign that you're ambitious. It's a sign that you know your value and lot of other things. Other thing that you can do complementary or in alternative to negotiating your salary is negotiating your career. Negotiating
Hmm.
your career, I mean, you want to know what's required to move to the next step. For example, let's say that you get hired in a given role. You want to ask, once I learn this job and I get good at this job, what do I need to do to get to the next step? What will I need to do to get to the next step? And if I work, if I'm reasonably talented and hardworking, how long does it usually take? This is usually something that is very good to ask, both because you get a lot of information about how to spend the next year at the company, that you know what you need to learn, what you need to do, and you don't waste time doing things that do not really matter. But it's also
Hmm.
good because once you do those things, like your boss told you to move to the next step, you need to achieve this, and that. If you achieve this, and that, then you are in a very strong position to say, I did it. Now it's time for me to move to the next step. Whereas if you did not negotiate that, then sometimes then things get much more blurrier and slower and everything else.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Fantastic. Any other question or anything else I can help you with?
I think these are pretty good questions, pretty good answers you gave me. I think it gave me the whole perspective on job search and how to get a job, how to land a job, and what to expect, and what are the some of the red flags also that a candidate should look for in a company. Yeah,
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
thanks.
So if you have any other question at any time, feel free to write me on my email. And so then I will take this recording, edit it, and then share it on YouTube so that other people can benefit from it. Okay?
For sure, for sure. Thank you so
Fantastic.
much, Luca.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You as well. Thank you so much.